Buonasera, buonasera a tutti, saluto subito tutti quanti, buon anno, è la prima volta che ci vediamo con Torino.net User Group, con Codemotion, con i nostri appuntamenti, ma oggi l'appuntamento non è un appuntamento in italiano, sarà un appuntamento totalmente in inglese, perché abbiamo un ospite internazionale, pensate ha fatto una grande levataccia, anzi al contrario, perché arriva da Singapore, e lo presento subito e switcho in inglese. Parleremo di Avalonia, ci spiegherà lui che cos'è. State collegati perché è un argomento molto interessante. Ok, grazie a tutti. Welcome here, Erik. Welcome here in Codemotion and Torino.net.
Hi guys, how are you?
I'm fine. You're good? You're fine?
Pretty good. I'm good.
Well, I said that it's 1.5 now in your country, right? In the night.
Yeah, it's a 1 a.m.
But I see that you are very fresh. So you want to introduce us to all the Avalonia world. And so I let you speak and I put myself in an angle, okay, in a corner. And you can speak about you, speak about Avalonia. The stage is all yours and good luck.
Okay, perfect. Let me just wait. All right, let me share my screen. Well, I needed to set up a new.
Yes, don't
set
worry.
Up a new laptop.
In the meanwhile, Erik, I want to remember to our people that they can go straight with the chat to make question and receive answers from Erik. And I want to say that Erik is one of the most expert of Avalonia all over the world. If you go to the Avalonia documentation itself, there is an example, a sample from Erik himself, and there is Fugaro that is saying, "Hello, Erik, nice to meet you." Okay, so you will find some Italian and worldwide people tonight for you. And it's not today. So if you want to share your screen, we can go.
Yeah. Let me share my screen.
Okay.
Hold on. I think.
Okay, the screen is ready. Okay, I am adding the screen to stage. Okay, so nice to meet you, Erik, and have a nice talk with us.
Okay. All right. Hi guys. Good evening. I think it's 6 p.m. over there. Actually, just this reminded me. In my previous work, I used to work for our enterprise architect was Italian, and he had this big team that always comes over to the office, and they're always so fun to to talk to, and to go drink, and we had a lot of fun when I was working with them. It's very much in contrast.
You can speak if you want. You can speak in Italian, Erik? If you
want.
I
wish. I don't know. Actually, I loved listening to the language, even if I don't understand a single word.
Okay, perfect. Okay, go to English. Okay.
I'll do it in English. That's the only one I know. That's the one I know anyway. Okay. So I'm sharing my screen. Can you guys see it? All right. Perfect. Okay. So this is about Avalonia, and I wanted to show an example that's just beyond the usual hello world. Because if I go and search for like Avalonia, I mean, there are more and more tutorials now coming up, but initially it was always just, a small window with a text box and changing colors and a little bit here and there. Yeah, so I think, I saw that, but those things, like, it got me interested in Avalonia, definitely. But, it's been a while now since, so I just wanted to, do something more that can show really the stuff that you could do with Avalonia. And when you build like real world applications that actual users are actually really going to use. And my email here it's at the bottom. So erik.araojo@wcfstorm.com. And I'm also on Twitter, though I log in every now and then, but not really a very good user of it. So Erik_.net is my handle over there. Okay, and yeah, so just a little bit about me. I've been doing .NET since the .NET 1.1 days. It's been a while, and I think over a year ago, I really got interested in Avalonia and started playing around with it. And most of my work really it's around back-end APIs like REST APIs, ASP.NET Core, those things. But I've always been interested on front end. So I've on the side I've worked on WPF. I started with Windows Forms, of course. Then I moved over to WPF. And then naturally, of course, when Avalonia came along, I tried it out, of course, because it's really for me it's really interesting to build an application that's that you have a single code base and it runs on Linux, it runs on Mac, and it runs on Windows, of course. So I think really for me that's very interesting. Also, as someone who worked as an engineering manager, it's like having a single code base is actually a lot of benefit to the company because then you only have to maintain a single code base. It's much easier to maintain because you only have one, and it's also a lot. Say the cost is a lot lower because if you work on different platforms, you don't have to have separate teams because you only have one team that works on a single code base. So in a work previous work that I had, we had separate teams. For example, we had the same app that was running on Android and iOS, and there was a kind of a web version for it. And there are three teams that are working on it. So there was a JavaScript team, and then there was another team that's working on Swift for the iOS app, and there's another one for Android. But they're all doing roughly the same thing. And for me, it's like, okay, it's like that now. It's like that over there. But the better way could be is that if you have a single code base, you can just work on that and then deploy it on all the different platforms. I think that would be the best option. And yes, for me, as I got started with Avalonia, I like playing around with instead of doing tutorials like small apps. I like working on useful apps that so that I don't lose the motivation. So, so for me, I started off with this first tool called VRock. So it's also up on GitHub if you want to have a look at it. So I played around with that using Avalonia. So basically, it takes your Swagger doc and it builds you a REST service essentially, which you can edit the responses and then you can call you can start calling that service. So it's very useful when you're doing testing. It's something that I built for my team because we were doing a lot of backend APIs. So they have a lot of microservices, and our clients are calling all those different microservices, and we had a need to mock one during development, maybe one endpoint or two or stuff like that. And after that, while I was doing that, BRock, internally BRock it's using a database called LightDB. I don't know if you guys are using it. So what's this? It's what do you call it? It's a document. It's a file-based document database. So it's kind of like SQLite, but SQLite is for SQL, but this one is a document database.
Okay.
So and that one had an editor only for Windows, and I was in that company. I was having a Mac, and whenever I'm debugging something, I have to copy the file from my Mac to my Windows, look at it from the tool, and then I have to copy it over back to my Mac.
Yes.
Then I can use it. After a while, I got tired, so I figured, hey, I could actually use Avalonia and just build some cross-platform tool for it. So that's how I ended up with that. And finally, the last one is it's FintX, which is a gRPC test tool. Again, it's built with Avalonia, and something that if you guys recall about WCF, there was Microsoft gave us a free tool called WCF Test Client, and there's also, of course, WCF Storm. And I wanted something to build something for gRPC, since we are the trend right now is we're seeing like adoption of gRPC as well. So a lot of companies are still doing a lot of REST APIs, but many are shifting towards REST APIs for their front end for the public facing APIs, which will be HTTP. But internally in their backend, they're using a gRPC, and so it's being used more and more these days. So I figured I'd build something that could be useful in that area. So these are the three apps that I've built, and then like I use this to really learn how to do it in Avalonia. Okay. So Avalonia, I don't know if you guys. So there's a lot of talk right now, right? A lot of hype with Avalonia right now. But I don't know if people know it, that Avalonia is they're saying it's an overnight. It's like suddenly it's like very successful, but actually it's been around for more than 10 years. It's like 10 years and 1 month, 1 or 2 months or something like that. And it started off with I think the name was Perspex. Like 10 years ago, it was an open. It was always been an open source project, and they've been working it for quite some time. And I think along the way they renamed to Avalonia, but it's been around for 10 years.
Okay.
And last year, Avalonia, was the most active .NET .NET Foundation project, and they have so many contributors. It's super active, and I think that's one of the strengths of Avalonia, is that even though it started 10 years ago with a core group of developers, and it actually started slowing. It grew quite slowly, and it started attracting more and more developers. And every year it just keeps on growing. And last year, actually, it's the most active project for .NET, most active open source project for .NET. And as you can see, it runs on multiple platforms. There's Windows, there's Mac, there's Linux, and of course you can run it on iOS, Android, and WebAssembly. So I don't. Most of the example apps that I've seen, even from the Avalonia website, are for desktop applications. I don't know if there are production apps for iOS and Android yet, but they have run some demos where they've shown that you can actually write iOS and Android code using Avalonia. And of course, it's used by multiple companies. These are just a few that I pulled from the Avalonia website. And if you're using JetBrains, some of their tools are built with Avalonia. I think that the ones that does the profiler in JetBrains, that is Avalonia, as far as I know.
For us, it's very interesting, the first point, that is the most active .NET Foundation project in 2023, because we are under .NET Foundation, and so I think that we are presenting to our people the best thing that we can present now. Okay. By the way, the second point is very important, as you said before, and the third point is showing that also companies that are speaking with developers are using it. JetBrains, Unity, GitHub itself, and other great companies like Canon, Tails, KLM, and so on, Schneider Electric, AMD. So I think that it's a worldwide product in this moment, and not more, let's say, experimental product that was 10 years ago. I want to add, Erik, also that there is a Telegram group that is very, very, very plenty of people that every day are writing. So there are lots of let's say point of joining of people, and the learning curve can be helped by all these resources. Right.
No, exactly, yeah. And I think it's also good to mention that by the way, I'm not in any way affiliated with Avalonia, the company, but one of their products is called Avalonia.xpf, which is essentially, it takes your existing WPF code, and then you can run it. It gets compiled or something, but you don't have to make any changes on your WPF code. Use Avalonia XPF, and then you can run it on iOS and Linux.
It's transforming, or it's like a magic on
I
behind
I,
the
I
code?
haven't tried it because you need
How?
a you need a license for it. So I haven't
Okay.
tried, but they have shown demos where it's really running, and a lot of the companies, like, the thing is, most of these, like, big companies like enterprises, they want their WPF apps to run, and even though it's running, they don't really go and advertise it, like, because it's their, like, it's kind of a line of business application. But that's the
Yes.
for Avalonia, the company, that's their main source of revenue, be this Avalonia.xpf.
Fine. Fantastic.
And also, right, I think only like a few months ago, some companies now, they have run some demos. They've shown some demos where companies that build those controls, like WPF controls, what's this, ActiPro, what's this, what are the other ones? A few more, those, and that they Avalonia was showing that they can take those controls that were built for WPF and run it in Avalonia itself without any change. So that is the what they could do with Avalonia XPF.
So
And
you are
now
saying that the legacy code is becoming the fresh code without touching the legacy code itself.
that is the claim of Avalonia company with Avalonia XPF. That's what they're saying. I haven't
O-
tried it myself. I don't
Okay.
think I'll be able to try because I can't afford the license for it.
But you are saying give them a chance, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a good migration path for companies to have a lot of WPF apps.
Okay. Okay. Perfect. So go straight to the code now.
Right.
Okay.
No, just a
Perfect.
little bit more. The architecture for Avalonia is
Of
looks
course.
like this. So the it's the same as Maui, but the difference is that on the renderer they're using Skia, and what this means is the kind of like WPF. WPF uses DirectX and it renders directly to the canvas. In this case, they're using Skia and it renders to the canvas. So this is the same way that Flutter works, right? So, and also Skia, I think, is used in Chrome, so there's no really issue with the performance or anything. And what this allows them is that if you write code, since they're rendering everything themselves, then it will look exactly the same on Windows, on Mac OS, and also on Linux. This is different from Maui, where instead of rendering, they added an abstraction layer on top of the built-in render of the OS. So in iOS, it's UIKit, Android widgets, Mac OS, it's Mac OS Catalyst. So they have a layer on top of it so that they can render the native controls. In Avalonia, they don't render native controls; they just render everything directly to the canvas.
Okay.
Okay, so if you want to try out Avalonia, so the first thing that you should do is run the Avalonia template. So run .NET new install Avalonia templates. So this will install all the Avalonia templates, and then you can use any of these. You can use Rider, VS Code, Visual Studio, Community Edition is fine. And then there's an Avalonia extension that you could always download. So I've tried all three. The best experience that you'll get is with Rider because of the XAML tooling.
What is the
So
XAML tooling of Rider? What has as magic?
uh, let me see if my Rider has installed properly. Uh, Let me see. I like this is Rider. Let's say, just for example, so this is all working fine, but the thing with Rider is, like, if I add a new control, there's always that red line that comes out with
Okay.
Rider, and then you can just click on that, and then you'll have a here it will give you an action that says how to fix that.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
So it makes writing code pretty easy.
Is there any visual editing in those three kind of
Yeah, there is.
editors?
There is a There is a preview editor, a
Okay.
previewer for it.
In Visual Studio Community, is there?
Yeah, there
Or
is one with the extension.
okay,
It's there.
perfect.
It's
Because I
it's there
think that
also.
in .NET MAUI, it's missing. I think
Oh,
that
okay.
it's missing. I think, but I'm not sure. But if I remember, it's missing, and is one of the things that are, let's say, frustrating more than the people, because
Oh,
you see only pieces of code and never have the sensation of what
yeah.
let's say, is what you see is what you get, but if you cannot see, you don't know what you get. Okay.
That is true. That is true. It's true. I mean, although personally, I haven't used it that much, but yeah, I do see some of my colleagues also would like to have a preview itself on the editor.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Just go through it. Okay. All right. So I think we can go through the code now. But before that, let me just give you guys a brief demo about FintX, because for the examples here, we'll be building kind of like a smaller, a light version of this tool using Avalonia. So let me just quickly show that. Uh, First of all,
FintX is your application, right, Erik?
yes, correct.
And I
FintX
think
is
that has become one of the official examples that Avalonia is carrying nowadays, right?
yes, it's in the Avalonia website, one of the apps listed as their
Just
showcase apps here.
because I said that you are one of the most expert all over the world,
Thank
and
you,
it
thank you.
is one one thing that is proving that I am not a liar.
That's, if you go to GitHub, you'll find FintX over there. Oops, sorry, it's scrolling very fast. All right, let me just run that, and let me see if my visuals is running fine.
Of course, it's fully compatible with .NET 8 nowadays, right?
Mm-hmm.
Avalonia.
Right. Yes.
And
So
we
yeah.
can go back to, let's say, .NET Core 3, maybe,
I'm
or
not
framework.
sure. A framework? I don't think so. For
Okay.
.NET Core, I'm not sure because the latest, maybe, but it'll be tough. The latest release for Avalonia is version 11. I think that works with .NET. I think .NET 6 at least.
Okay.
But the sample code I'll be using it'll be on what's this,
Okay.
on .NET 8. All right, so let me just run the. So I have a gRPC service. I didn't do anything. I just ran the template, the project template from Microsoft. So it doesn't do anything. It just says hello. So let me run this. Where is that? Okay, so it says it's running on localhost 5070. Okay, let me open up FintX. So I will build a. So what FintX does is it builds a. Oh, sorry, where is that? I need to find the path. While I'm doing that, SSHTTP localhost 5070. I'll just do it like any say test. Okay, so what FintX does is it takes your protobuf file, or if you have a reflection service endpoint, it will do that, and it will inspect that, and it will actually create C# code. You can see here greet.g.cs, and compile that code and inspect that code, everything in runtime. And so you can see here, it was able to find these methods. There was only one method in the protobuf file, but C# .NET generates two. One is synchronous, another one is an asynchronous method. So if I clicked on that, and if I say add a value here, say hello on the name, and then I run it, it will call my gRPC service. So just hello, hello. I will just say, so let's say Savi. So tell you hello, Savi. So that's what the tool does, right? And this is what we'll try to make a mini version of it. So we'll have this part here, and then we'll have this part over here, and then some sort of an editor for the request, and then we'll also display a response. All right, where's my? Let me go back to my presentation. Where did that go? Let me just stop this now and close this. Let's close this one. Okay. Okay, so that is Fintex. You can it's built with Avalonia. So in Windows, you can do winget install Fintex and it will get installed. Or macOS or Linux, you can download it from the releases page. Okay, so if you start to create an Avalonia project, so once you have the template, so this one I took a screenshot on Rider, you'll see this. Most people will use the Avalonia.net MVVM app template.
Okay.
Right, so if you select that and then create a project, it will create a project for you like this. And maybe you'd wonder, what's this thing? The viewlocator.cs. So that is because a lot of newcomers to Avalonia is like wondering, why is it there? What's that for? And it's a lot of questions that I see in the forums around that too. So I would, I would like to actually explain how that works and why is it there on the project template. All right, so if I go back to here, so by the way, if this sample code that you're seeing, you can find that as well on GitHub on my repository. There's a folder there called Avalonia sample, so you can open it so you could follow along. Where's that? Avalonia. GitHub. You should be able to see that Avalonia sample here.
Okay.
So you can see that same code that I'm showing is all there, and I've labeled it like 1, 2, 3 so that it's used in the presentation.
Okay.
So for the first part, let's start off with a 1 that says 1. So when you create a project, it gives you this viewlocator.cs, right? And what does that mean? So if I open this, yeah, something like it's just a class, but it implements an data template. And this is something that's similar to what you see in WPF, where you have data templates, but you also have data template selectors. In Avalonia, this kind of like has been combined in a single interface. You can make an implementation that does both the template and the data template selector functionality. So if you can see here from this code, so what it simply does is it just takes the name, it just does a normal a string replace of, if you have a view model, it gets replaced with a view. That's it. And then it uses reflection to look up that type, and then creates an instance of the type, assigns it the data context to that type. So again, similar to WPF, and returns you an instance of that control.
Okay.
Right. So So what actually that allows us is that, if I have, for example, in the sample code, when you created this template, there will be a main window.xaml. In my view models class, there will be a main window view model.cs. So so this view locator.cs, it kind of enforces you to have that, what do you call that, a kind of a convention in your code.
Yes. Clear.
So clear. So now you'll have that here. So I've created pages, for example. As an example, I've created an about page. Then there's a corresponding about page view model, main page, then main page view model. Same goes for the other things. They have their own. So and if I run this, oops. Hey, come on, why is that run right?
And the gRPC must be launched also.
No, that was just for the fintechs demo.
Okay. So it's enough only the project. Now we are launching the 1, then the 2, then the 3. The sample gRPC is not to be used now.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let me just run it. So it's just, wait, it's on my other window. It comes up here. So it's just this app. So it's a dark theme, and then there's a button called main, and then if I click on about, the view switches to another one, right? So what did I do? So what was done to get this look and feel? So first thing is, if I go see my main window, I've hard coded a background, which is the dark background, and I've added this extend client area to decoration so that it hides the default toolbar from the window. And what else is there? And then here I just have a small on the main application you have grid, and then in that grid you have above you have the app name, which is what you see on top right there.
Yes.
And then there's a content control. So a content control is just a control that can display whatever content there is. So this is where the data template, the view locator comes in very handy, because I can create just a content control, assign a binding to it, main menu view model, and then that's it. And then I don't have to do anything anymore. So what will happen here is that when it reaches this part, Avalonia is going to look for the data template that it can use to be able to render this main menu view model. And since I don't have a data template here, it will actually search all the way up. It will start here, then go to the border, go to the grid, and then eventually it will come to the root application, which is your app.xaml. And in your app.xaml, you're gonna have this under the application data templates. The view locator is there.
Okay.
So I don't have everything is wired up automatically. So when I created that view model, that main menu view model here, I just have to follow since if I create folders, the namespaces are going to follow the folders by convention. I create this view model here. I have to create the corresponding control here, and then that should be right. Then it's right here as well. All right, just if you guys have any questions, you can interrupt me anytime.
I'm seeing that there are no questions now. But I have a question.
Please go ahead.
That content control is referring that main window view model. Okay, can I see the main window view model.cs? Which kind of fields contains?
Yeah, it's
okay. let's say
Nothing much. Actually.
there is not much
Yeah.
fields here.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So in that case, the main window view, main menu view. No, we are seeing it's talking about the main window view model, not the main menu view
Sorry,
model.
the main window. Okay, let me open the main.
Okay, main window view model has several properties. Okay,
Right.
but not difficult to understand. Okay,
No.
perfect. Okay.
So it's just like a lot of view model properties.
Okay. Okay.
Right.
The binding is always two-way data binding or data binding, or can be
Yeah, by
chosen.
default it's two-way.
Okay.
You can change it to like in WPF, but by default it's two-way.
Okay. Okay. It's just like the old known WPF, right?
Yeah, exactly. So
Okay. Fine.
okay, and what else is there?
That in
Up
some
here?
manner we have already seen in Xamarin. That in some manner we have already seen in, I can say, Silverlight. So all the project that has an XML, an XAML, and a two-way data binding with some view model. The MVM pattern is always more or less the same, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the same. So one of the nice things is with Avalonia is that all the WPF skills that or maybe if you did all your XAML skills is gonna transfer over to Avalonia. That's what I found
Okay.
out. And
Perfect.
there's only a bit of newer things that you had to learn. And one of the, let's say, maybe for this, going back a bit to this example, the switching. Um, if I go to my main window view, so there's this content control, and there's a binding to this current page view model, right? So whenever I click here, I'm just assigning a new instance to the current page. And the data templates, it will resolve and it will render the correct view for it. So for example, if I go to the current page view model, all right, so that went to the auto-generated one. Current page view model here. So when eventually this show main is going to be called. If I go do that. All right, did I debug? No, I didn't debug. So here you can see I'm just assigning the different view model instance. And since these are different types, it will be able to figure out which view to render for it.
Okay.
So that is one of the like benefits of having the iData template, because it's really allows you to build this dynamic UIs. Like if I go back, so now this is debug now. If I click on about, and that should just come here, and then it just assigns a new instance, the about page view model. And then that's it. Yeah. Then it goes to about screen.
We are written show main and show about. Sorry, because the size of the font is a little bit to be enlarged if possible. Okay, now I can read. I'm 47 in next 2 months, so I can read from this side, no less.
Yeah, sorry about that. That's
No, it's normal.
should be fine. Okay.
Okay, so the show main and show about are written in the usage.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. So
just
in my
for a quick recap of this.
Yeah. So in my main menu, where you see those two buttons, right? So there's a button with a show main
okay,
command.
Perfect.
And then the show main command eventually just calls that one. Okay. And if we go back to my slides, okay. So with that, like simple, what's this? simple application, what we have seen now is that the concept that was used there is this mainly is this data template, right? So what is the data template? It defines the visual representation of whatever data that you have. So you put in the data, which is your view model, and then you create another view which will render that data. So that is essentially the data template. It will link that your data to your view. And when you have dynamic user interfaces, this is very useful. I've worked on WPF projects before where some the developers were not familiar with the data template selectors, and they were like rendering views and then just setting the visibility, hiding and showing,
Okay.
and it becomes very messy because even if a control is not you know view is not visible, all the bindings for that control are still active. So whatever code that you have is still running even though you don't see the controls. So because that control is still part of the visual tree. But when you do it like with the data template or data template selectors, it gets removed entirely from the visual tree. I think and that's actually a good thing in terms of performance of your app, in terms of the memory usage for the app, because whatever you see in your UI are the objects that are live. If you don't see it, then it's gone. And for data templates, I gave that as example for the switching, but it's used commonly on items control, like list boxes, for example. So when you or data grid, so when you want to repeat, when you're showing like repeated information or a list of information, so you can have data templates there. And
Hmm.
as I mentioned, it's searching via the logical tree. So it starts up at the control where you have that template. But let's say, for example, my content control will start there. If it doesn't find a template, it will search up. Then it will search up. It will search up. Eventually, it will reach the app.xaml.cs where you'll have the visual what's this the viewlocator.cs data template.
Okay.
And yeah, so you can like for maximum control, you can use the iData template interface, what I mentioned. And also what we've seen is I've also created there a user control. So a user control is just something that you create to group your controls together. Something that makes sense to group them together. You create a user control for it. Or if you want something to reuse somewhere, then you also make a user control for it. So when you install the extension, you will be able to just right click and say Avalonia user control. And then it will create a user control for you. If you don't have the extension, it's just a user control is just again it's another XAML file, but it just the tag is just user control. So this is very very similar to WPF. By the way, if you can look here, this is WPF code actually. This is very very similar, and the only I think the changes would be the namespace. This Avalonia UI thing, something like that. Everything else looks like WPF. Okay, where's my presentation? And oh, one nice thing about what's this Avalonia, it's that they have what they call compiled bindings. So and by default, it's enabled. If you open your project file, you will see this one of the properties there. It says compiled bindings true. So what this means is that if you make a mistake in your XAML file in WPF, that's going to be a binding error that's going to happen at runtime. And
Okay.
those are kind of nasty things that it's very hard to debug. But here, compiled bindings is enabled by default, which is this is a great thing. And when you compile it, it will have a compiled error. We can try that. For example, if I open one, let's say if I make the show main command, I put say show main command 22, for example.
Yes. Yes.
And you can immediately you can see it with Rider, like Rider already telling you there's a
Yes.
problem with this. For the other editors, I don't think they will tell you this, but if you build it, since the compiled binding is enabled, then it will fail.
Oh, understood. Yes.
So you see that the error is there. Unable to resolve properties.
Yes, yes, of course.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So I think this is a very, very useful feature that's given by Avalonia. And of course, so for compiled binding to work, you have to specify the data type that will be used for that control, which will be the data type for your context, your data context. So in this case, it will be I took this from the about page view, and my data type is the about page view model. So remember that on the initial one, the viewlocator.cs, we had that kind of naming convention that's being enforced.
Yes.
Okay, so for compiled bindings, yes, it turns binding errors into compile times errors. It's much better than the reflection-based binding, which we have in WPF. And but it's you can disable it, of course. For each of for any control, you can just add this attribute x compiled bindings equals false, and then it will be disabled for that control and all child controls below it. So that would mean
Okay.
if you have errors in your binding there, that will show up only at runtime.
Okay.
Normally, this is not done. Actually, just to share, initially when in the early beta phases of Avalonia, the default is compiled bindings false, and then when they release the first version, the
Mhm.
version 11, which is the production version, they switch it to compiled bindings true. So I think which is I think a good thing.
But the result is that you have the binding when compiled inside a DLL file, and
Yeah.
otherwise you have the XAML file outside. Let's say if you find a bug, you can just make a bug fix with compile bindings false. You can make a bug fix just putting the XAML file on your production environment, or with compile and binding false, it's not working in this manner.
Not sure how that would work.
Just to understand
Compile.
why you should do compile binding false. I understood that the way is to make
I
compile binding
honestly,
true.
I don't know why you would turn it off. I never turned it off before,
Okay,
but
okay,
it's just that if you turn it off, compile bindings false, it will just work the same way as WPF.
okay, okay. Perfect, perfect.
Okay, and all right, so this is the this is our app that I just showed you. It's not yet pretty, but it's a good start, and we've learned even just with a simple app. We've learned about the data templates, and we've learned about compile bindings, and we were able to style it, give it a different window chrome, and then the colors and everything, right? So let's do the second part. So let's reorganize some of the UI, reorganize the UI. That hard-coded colors that I had, let's refactor that and then put it in a better place. And then some of the common UI elements, like we make it more consistent. Like you have the same look and feel, like so that it should be like a proper app. All right, and okay, before that, so let me go back to Writer, and now I switch over to the second project. Let me just compile this.
We see the result, and so we understand how to arrive to it, right?
Right. Okay, so let's just run this so you can see some of it. Let's look at the result and how it looks. Okay. All right, so this is how it looks now. So same app, but it was styled differently. So now I have an icon here. I think this one is from button. I switch it to a toggle button so that I can have a selected state.
Mm-hmm.
And then if I select that, then it switches over to another view, which is the about page view. And of course, we have this something in our screen now. Uh, so like that, right? So how did this go? So let's start with the about page. So we know how the switching works. So let's look at the about page. So this head one. So if I open again, go back to my views, I know that that's going to be here on the about page. And I have this text block which says, hey, our sample app. And there's this thing called classes, which H1, right?
Okay.
And then another text block with another class called H2, and then another one we just don't have anything. So what is this H1 and H2, right? So these are styles. You can like refactor your styles and group them together. So I put it here in another file called styles.xaml on this folder. In other projects, they would have actually a separate project where they would put these styles. So since this is a
Okay.
sample style, I put it in the same project in a separate folder. But they could have it. Most people will put it on a separate project itself. So you can have multiple projects referencing the same
Yes, of
project, and then
course.
they can have the same style.
Yes, 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 yes. Normally.
So here you can see, for example, which is it? For example, the head one, uh, it sets you it sets the foreground property of a. It says here selector. So one difference with WPF is that in WPF they would put here target type, and you can only put the type. But in Avalonia, it's a little bit more complex than that. So you have a selector, and then the first one you would put is the type, and then there's this class that you can label it any way you want. So it could be H1, H123, up to you. And within this style, I can set some properties. Say, okay, my text foreground. So this is a static resource, again similar as WPF, right? So you can define static resources as well. And this is just a brush, and with the writer, it gives you a kind of a preview of what the color actually is. And then there's the size of the font that I set it to 24, which is big. It's H1. And for H2, the font is a little bit smaller. And the color is the same, but I have another style here. So it says here, when the pointer is over my text block, I will change the foreground to another color, which is blue. So so this is something that's different, new with Avalonia, where you can have styles. You can have like nested. You can nest the styles.
Yes.
So I've only tried like 2 levels of nesting. I don't know, maybe 3 levels would work or not. So that is why when you come here on H2, when I put my mouse over, then it switches over to blue.
Yes,
And
yes.
this is the H1 is the big one. So, and then the last one is just right. And then the last one is just a text block. So it's kind of like a default. Any text block, it will change the color to this. So this is common when you're writing apps. You want to have a default color for your font, for example, for your app, so it's consistent all over the app. So you define one like this.
Eric, as far as you
Yep.
know, is that like a cascade style sheet like in CSS itself? So if you
Yes, exactly. That's what Avalonia says. It's the styling in Avalonia is based more on CSS than
okay, it's CSS. It's like the same behavior, and with styling style is like a SAS. Let's say other
mm.
now the modern CSS can use the styling style. So let's say Avalonia arrived before CSS itself.
Mm. I'm not very good with CSS, but that's what say Avalonia
Or
is like.
but more or
Their
less it's the
styling
same.
is
It's the same.
yeah,
It's the same. Let's say same intent. Okay.
right, right. And maybe I'll switch over to this static resource you can see here. So one other things that most people do is that they define some static resources in a file by itself, so that you can have those resources available all over your application. For example, it's quite common to put the colors of the font or the windows or whatever in a resource file like this. And again, this is the same as what you would do in WPF, right? So
Mhm.
the on the styles, you can see that I'm referencing this my text foreground brush, which is, if I press F12, it will come here, and then this is the color for that. Yeah. So one of the nice things that we do with Rider is that you can just switch, you can jump back and forth. It's quite easy with VS Code. I think in Visual Studio, I don't see that that's happening. Right. So that is the about page. And if I go to my main, it's the same. So you just have this two kind of like two blocks.
Okay.
So if I go to the main page, nothing is just again the same. I just have a border, yeah, like that. And then it uses the same. Then instead of hard coding the colors, I'm using the control back static resource here, and then static resource here to have that nice color where you have, so that I can have like a nice background, so that I can put something here later on. Okay, so let
Mhm.
me switch over back to the presentation. All right, so okay, so what did we see for that? The second part, right? So we have resources, as I've shown on another file. So in the example code, I had it in a single file, on a separate file by itself, but you can actually define your resources at different levels. For example, if you have a resource that's specific to a certain control, you can just say stack panel.resources, and then you add your resources there. For example, I have something that's only for the stack panel. And of course, this if you want it available globally to the entire application, you should add it to the application.resources add it in one of the in a merge dictionary. Again, same as how WPF works.
Mhm.
So yeah, so resources normally are defined as external files. It's just it's easy to maintain, and if you have a code, if you're maintaining a project and there's so many files and so many like lines of code, if you have the resource and in a file by itself, it's just easy to just go and find to jump into that. The IDE will help you also do that, so it's makes it easy to locate if you do it as an external file.
Mhm.
And just like the styles and the data templates, these resources, they are resolved by searching up the logical tree,
See.
right? And then it will just go up until it finds the key that's matching.
I see. I see.
All right. And by the way, while I run this, if I press F12 over here, I pressed F12, and you'll get this. It comes with the dev tools of Avalonia.
Ah,
This is
fine.
the same as what says in WPF. You'll have this in Visual Studio, and there was this open source tool before called Snoop in WPF. Right.
Erik,
So yeah. So hello.
you were frozen on my PC.
Okay. I can hear you just fine though.
No, maybe the F12 is too heavy for the connection.
Oh.
Maybe it's that.
Yeah.
But it's very useful.
Yes, it is. So okay, you can play around with it. For example, it works the same way as Snoop or the ones in the live previewer in WPF. That's a foreground example.
And the dev tools comes within Avalonia itself, or
Yeah.
is
Oh,
an
it comes
external?
together with it. It's from Avalonia.
Okay, fantastic.
So
And in production, you have the same thing.
no, if you build it in a debug mode, it's there, but in
Perfect.
production, in release, it's not there.
Okay, nice to know.
I think it's somewhere. Let me see if I recall where that is set. Uh, it's somewhere in here though that says I've forgotten where it is. It'll be
No.
somewhere in there. But anyway, in debug mode is there. In
In the
release mode,
manifest, no.
yeah, not really sure now where that is. I remember seeing that before somewhere.
But it's not
Okay, no, not important.
not important, but good to know that
Yeah.
it exists.
Right. As you can see here, I changed that to green, so it will reflect. So you can play around with your app until you can get the right view, you can get the right alignment of all the different controls.
Okay.
Okay.
And this is itself the visual editor, because
Mm,
if you can play and then say, okay, in this case, but maybe it's only for stylish and not for.
yeah, let me see if I have the visual editor enabled. Oh, okay. I need to install another tool, I think. If the
Okay.
in Rider, you should see it here with a preview. Then I should see my control over here.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna just go back here and okay, and we saw the styles, right? So the style is just this. It does this selector, and then there's a syntax here, kind of like as we mentioned. It's like kind of like CSS. And it's similar to CSS, and you can make it, an external file, or you can make it as a part of a control. And again, as usual, it's resolved by going up the logical tree.
Yes.
So by all the pages, these pages, by the way, I've added a link to the documentation on the Avalonia website. So you just like in styles here, if you click on that, you should be able to go to the whoops, I'm not the slideshow. So that you can, if you're interested, you can also go have a look at in the documentation for that. So I won't be able to discuss everything. Also, I don't know everything about here, so
Of
you can
course,
always
yes.
follow the link and then just get a whole lot more information from the Avalonia documentation itself. The documentation, by the way, has improved by a lot. This was almost non-existent a year ago. And the only way to learn about it is Avalonia is like to play around with it and look at all the sample code. But nowadays the documentation has improved, and you can also like find a whole lot of more information now.
Okay.
So that is actually, I think, one of the main feedback that the Avalonia team got from from the developers, that hey, your documentation needs to improve, otherwise the other developers will not be able to pick it up. Okay. Right. Oh wait, I'm running out of battery. Let me just go and go about it quickly. Hello? Can you guys still hear me? Okay, cool.
Yes, you are frozen as a picture, but go. Okay, you are okay with your voice.
Okay.
Maybe try to take off your camera and then on again.
It just says my battery is running low. That's why. Let me. Can you give me like 1 minute? I'll get a charger for this.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. It's okay.
Now where's the charger for this?
Just so we have seen that the Avalonia project itself is, remember, that is open source. And given that there is an Avalonia team itself, There is a great community
Is it, let's see.
around it. So the documentation is made by Avalonia team itself, but there are, I want to repeat, there are sorts of forums, Telegram groups, and so on, where you can learn lots of things, and you can see other people that maybe are facing the same problems that you have, and other people is working with you on your projects because they help too much. I see on Telegram chat that I am participating, but I think that there is lots of other places to join people that are using Avalonia in the world. In Italy, there is not a community, as far as I know. I found the previous CEO that was near Milan, although he was not Italian. But in Italy, as Italian people, I want to say that if there is an Italian guy that want to make a talk about Avalonia, of course, in another places than this one, he can contact us so that we can go further with the CodeMotion places. Erik, you're okay with your charger?
Yeah, I got my charger. Can you guys see my screen now?
We see all your screen, but you are stuck on the same position,
Let me.
touching your head, but it's not a problem for
Oh,
us. Even if you should take your camera off and on just to
I
see
see.
if we can see you. Okay,
Okay.
you're off now, but we can hear you
All
perfectly
right. Did
if
it
we want.
change my sharing? No.
Your sharing is okay. Example style classes now. Okay, your
Ah, okay,
sharing
okay,
is okay.
perfect.
Only your picture. Now your picture is the fake picture. Okay, it's not a picture.
All right. That's perfect. I mean, we don't need that picture
Oh, if you want,
anyway.
you should come back. Okay,
No, it's
you
okay. I think
should,
the presentation is more important. All right. All right. So as okay,
okay,
we can continue.
as you
So
wish,
again,
as you
style
wish. Okay.
classes. Yeah. So as I shown you in the about page, the style classes is just defined like this. So you have a in your control, let's say in a text block, right? You define, let's say my text block has a class called h1, and that is going to be matched with a style that matching that selector. So the first one is the type dot, and then the class is here. So you can see that's matching. So that is why you see that the font is bigger. For example, if you apply the h1 for this text box control. So it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward actually. And most of the style classes are, styling is done this way.
Okay.
And these are just example of style classes that I pulled from the Avalonia documentation. And I think this is pretty close to CSS, right? So you can create classes like a button, like right. I just created the text blocks.h1, so you can create a class called .red. So presumably you would have a red font over there or a red button, and yeah. So you can. There are many ways to style, and then you can just like play around and see what will work for your scenario in this case.
Let's say that is more or less as CSS.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
I think
more or less.
they're
It's not the
they're have
same, but more or less it's the same.
yeah, they're heavily inspired by CSS. Yeah, I think we could say it that way. And there's this what they call pseudo classes. If you see this the type, and then there's a colon, and then there's a pointer over. So pointer over is a pseudo class, right? It's
Mhm.
usually it's about a state of the UI, like when it's a point. There's a pseudo class for your when the mouse pointer is over the control, so it's a pointer over pseudo class. And then there's a focus when that control has focus, and there's a check if it's a selected, if it's checkbox and those things. So it depends on whatever control. You can also define your own pseudo class if you want to, but you'll have to do it in the code. And you can target like one or more pseudo classes. For example, here it's just showing you pointer over, but I could combine, let's say, focused and pointer over, so that I will have a style when a certain control is in focus and the mouse is over it. And again, I have the link here to the pseudo class, so to the documentation. All right. So, and this is our app, right? So with just those, so what we've done is like we've taken the hard coded controls, hard coded values like the colors, and refactored them into a resource and a separate file called resource file. And then we just reference that resource file in the app.xaml, so that we can use those resources anywhere in your application. So now all our resources are centralized into a single file, and we've also created styles, and so that we can have the same look and feel for all the for example, for these two buttons over here. Maybe I think I didn't show the main. I'll show this two buttons, so that the styles for that is a little bit more, say, involved. If I go to my second sample, if you go to my view, so the main menu view, so this is the button. So here, okay, before I oops, come on. Here, the button, I've changed it to a toggle button, so that I can have a selected state. So in this toggle button, I have a view box, which is again same as what you have in WPF when you want to render vector images. And then you have yeah, so this is that one toggle button. And then the second toggle button also has a view box with a text, with a stack panel. There's a view box, and then below it there's a text block. And that is what you see on the oops. Right, and that is what you see. These are the two toggle buttons, and then this icons are the ones that are in the view box right there. Okay, so but how does this part works, right? So if let's say if I select it, and then there's a blue bar here, and then the color of the icon, now it's kind of grayish. If I select it, turns into blue, right? So we use styles for that. So the way that works is, for example, for that particular one, oops.
Let's see, we have written something like SVG inside that canvas, right?
Yeah. So that is not, by the way, good practice to put it there. You can just actually put those SVG on a separate file by itself. Again.
Okay.
Yeah. But just to demo the styles, for example, here we have a default. It's like I said, if you want to make your UI consistent, you create a style that applies to all. Say, for example, in this case, for the toggle button, we say, okay, your brush is this 2 is telling you that display only the one on the left side right there. And then, some alignment things. And then what we tell here is that here, for example, this is what you have from the toggle button when the mouse is over it, right? And then there's this special syntax so that we can go into the template and then look into the content presenter of that toggle button, and then we change the color of the brush to our bluish highlight color, right? So that is what you see right there. So that's why it becomes blue with a bar on the left side. Yeah, and then when it's checked, it's the same thing. We set the colors again. And here, this is more like again, if I want to change, so to make the font consistent, we say, okay, if I've there's a stack panel within the text block, and then we set those. And then we do the same thing for the rest. So that's why we can get those colors. And then our UI is consistent. So if I add another toggle button, that same style is going to be applied. So I have
Yes.
a consistent UI here.
Yes, of course.
All right. And then, okay, then finally, let me just switch back to the slides. This is what we have. And lastly, so let's get to the final part. Let's add more stuff like similar to FintX, right? So you have a control, you have a way to invoke the service, display the method. Like, oops, what is it? I have this here where I have this like my gRPC server, and then I have my request, and then I have my response. I'm not going to build something exactly the same, but do kind of like with similar functionality. And that is what's done here on the sample final. Let me just compile it. Oops, a lot of yellow stuff.
Something around nulls. Nulls,
Nulls,
right?
yeah.
Usual warning.
Yeah, I should have cleared that, but didn't have time. I think that's a good warning, those nulls. Okay, so here's our, after all the changes, this is now our app. So I have here, I've added now, okay, so the about page, I didn't change at all.
About is always the same. Yes.
Exactly. So for the main, I added this is a tree data grid.
Okay.
So Avalonia also has the tree view control, and I could have used the tree view here, but I wanted to show the tree data grid because of two things. One is, like
maybe F12 here can help us just to understand the structure, right?
Okay.
That you are speaking about.
Yeah.
If your PC is taking the strength.
Did it work?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So let's see, on my main. So yeah. So if it's highlighting, right? Yeah. Okay. Right. So on my main page view, I have my border. Inside that, I will have my tree data grid.
Okay.
All right. But unfortunately for the tree data grid, that's all we will see. It doesn't go below what's inside the tree data grid.
Well, of course, but the structure is very clear in this way.
Yeah. And then I have my grid splitter, and then I have my border for the request, the splitter, and then a border for the response.
Okay.
Right.
So there are three borders that has content, right?
Yeah. Right.
Splitted by a grid splitter, because border is like a cell inside the grid.
Yeah, it's just a container.
Yes, because usually when we think about grid is row and columns, but really in WPF, grid is something that is a container of other things. Yes.
Yeah.
It's a little bit misleading of natural speaking about, okay, but who is aware from WPF sees grid and so says, but where are the columns, where are the rows? While grid usually is a container, let's say.
In the code, of course, you can in the XAML you'll be able to specify what is the column.
Yes.
In which row or column it should fall inside. Oh, by the way, if you can see here, on the styles, right, that I mentioned about the pseudo class, right? So if I hover my mouse over here, you can see on this DevTools it changes. Like on my main window, there's a pointer over now. You see that?
Okay.
So this is how, for me, when I was playing around with it, I don't know what are the pseudo classes that are supported. I just go into DevTools and then watch it change. Like if I select something, then I will have a few more.
Well, but it's fantastic. It's a fantastic tool.
It is very useful. Yeah, very useful.
Yes.
And when you're playing around with the styles, you can also have a look at the actual visual tree of it.
Mm-mm.
So that then it's easy to make all those styles that they go into the template, the content presenters, and all those things. So there's a tab there for the visual tree.
Yes.
Okay, so for the main one, so how does this work? Right, so what's that? Let me open my
Three data
writer.
grid.
Yeah, 3 data grid. So I go to my main page. Let me just collapse that. Wait, why is that taking up? So I have a 3 data grid on the first column, right? We have the 3 data grid, and then I define so the 3 data grid. The way it works is you have to define a data template in the resource,
Okay.
right? And then I say here I give it okay. For the first column, I will just have I will have a stack panel with a vector image with a view box, and then I will have the text, right? So this is what you see. Oh, where's that? There's what you see there: the icon, the blue one, and then the text.
Okay.
And then for the second column of the data grid, just as an example of showing a 3 data grid with multiple columns, I created a second column with just some with just some buttons.
Okay.
The buttons don't do anything.
Yes.
Right.
So
So that's why you see those buttons right there. So you can have 2 columns. You can have, if you want 3 columns, it's up to
of
you.
course it's the same. Yes. Yes. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And for this one, for the second column, right, you have the request. I have, let me just collapse the first column. So there's my grid splitter, and then the second one is a content control, which is binding to this request. If I F12 that, it goes into this request view model. So that would mean I'm going to have a view, which is, if I have request view model, then I should have a request view
Yes,
.sample
of course.
as well. So if I open that,
Because of the data locator, right?
yes,
The view
because of the
locator.
view.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yes. There, this is where you will find now. This is the Avalonia edit one
Okay.
you see over here. This is
Now I
why.
understand. Okay. It's a control. Oh, fine.
Yeah, it's another NuGet package, so you can have. And I've done is here I've added that, and also I've added some code to display to add some syntax highlighting for JSON.
Yes. And the highlighting of JSON is inside that package, right?
No, you have to add it yourself. But what I've done is in this sample code, I've added that the highlighting is defined with this JSON dot. There is a default highlighting, but in my case, I wanted to have different colors, so I created this JSON dot XSHD,
Okay.
which is the
Okay.
syntax definition for the highlighting, and it gives you all the different colors.
Okay. Okay.
And if I go into the request view, for example, since this is a view, highlighting is kind of a view logic, right? So I just added in the request view code behind. So set up syntax highlighting. So what it does is just it takes the JSON
Perfect.
XSHD
Now I
and then
understand.
just loads it like
Okay.
that. Yeah.
Okay. Now I understand. Yes.
And then you have the Avalonia edit, and then you have this a deadline text with a date picker, and then below that you have a button with an ad, and then there's this list box. This is what I mentioned earlier in the beginning, where the data template is mostly used, with the items control. The list box is an items control. So here you can see I have a list box, and then I can assign a data template to each of the items, so that I can define how each of the item of the list box is displayed. And here you see, there's a key text box, and then there's a key text block, and then there's a text box where you can enter some values. In gRPC, you send headers, and which these are key value pairs. So that is why here, for example, if I see here, if I make this a little bit bigger, so that is what you see over here. This is the date picker. This just comes built in with Avalonia. And the button that have on the side the headers, if I click on that, it just adds new keys. Right. So and that you will find on the let's say if I go to writer, this so there's a binding called to the headers, and then on the
Okay.
command, which is, if I go, what's this? If I scroll to the top to the data context for the request view model, and then you guys will see where it's all coming from. So when I click on that plus button, I just add another value to the collection,
Okay.
and then the list box will update itself.
Can we come back to the view just to understand how the list box is shown?
Yeah, sure. So it's shown like this.
Here is how it's shown physically, but in the code.
In the code.
Yes.
Go back to writer, request view. So the list box is here. So the template,
the list
right?
box. So the data template is that. Okay. The stack panel is a piece, and he knows that from one to the other, there is the margin. Okay, perfect.
Oh, yeah. I added that.
Perfect. I didn't understand where was the margin. Now I see it. Okay, it's very easy to understand and to use. Of course, you have to know which are the controls, but as always in all languages, all visual languages. Okay, right.
Right. So, and finally, just simple one. I've added this button over here. So
Okay.
there's just a small implementation. If I click on that, so this is a text box that comes with WPF. So as you can see, it looks like that. It won't allow you to have something nice like this. But yeah, just to show the contrast between you can have Avalonia edit or you can have your text box.
Okay, so the Avalonia can be, let's say, styled as we have seen, while the text box not.
Yeah, and more importantly, if you're dealing with large text, Avalonia edit is recommended to use compared to the text box.
Okay.
Because, for performance reasons. Yes. Even Avalonia developers themselves, they say if you have very large strings, use Avalonia edit instead of the text box.
Okay, fine.
All right. And then, so this run button, I think that should be on the quite simple one. That should be, sorry about that. That should be just this. It just assigns the text to.
Okay. Okay.
So all these annotations, by the way, this observable property, these are not part of Avalonia. This is coming from the MVVM toolkit. So it is another package. So in WPF, you normally have to create a getter and setter, and then you have to implement the iNotify property change. So in MVVM toolkit, they're using source generator, so you can just annotate this with this attribute, and then it will generate the code for you.
I can say, Erik, finally. Yeah. I can say finally, because the iNotify property changes always on the setter was quite boring to be done.
Yeah, exactly. It's very repetitive. Yeah.
Yes. Even if maybe sometimes you should use the iNotify property changes, because you have to go inside the code to do something custom, let's say, for a property. Okay, but yeah, usually 99% it's not.
No, you can still do that. You can create your normal property getter and setter.
Yes. I understand. I imagine that it's this.
One thing that's
yes.
one thing that's only like a little bit, I say a little bit annoying for me is that in Visual Studio, if or in Rider, if I'm going through the code, I will just put here, for example, put the if I normally press F12, so to
Okay.
navigate to F12 to that, and then it brings me to the
Ah,
to the auto-generated code, and which is not what I want. I want the actual view model class, but it's a minor annoyance because of that.
yes, yes, yes. Okay,
Yeah,
very good.
so that's it. Let me see.
Just a
Go back.
question that I think that everybody can have now, even
Yeah.
if it's 3 o'clock in the morning, in the night, at your
Oh
time.
yeah,
But
yeah, it's real good, but
you
that's fine.
you you're still awake, so I want to go deeper just for 2 minutes. Okay, these things we have shown all on your laptop. Okay,
Right.
consider that you should produce an, let's say, an APK for this. How
Yeah,
can you move further to see? Because the trick is that these things will go also to an Android device. Okay,
exactly, exactly.
how we can move from this example? Okay.
Yeah, so I think I have that also in my slides, but again, just to recap before I go to that part. This is what we did now for the sample app. We have a tree data grid with two columns,
Yes, of
a
course.
Valonia edit with syntax highlighting over there, a button with a binding for the command. Then there's a text box, then there's a list box with the item template. So I labeled all this so that when you guys go look at the code, then you can link the code to this UI, and you know where
Yes.
to search for things. All right. Okay, so so I have your question about deployment. So for me,
Ah,
what
okay.
what what have I tried? So for Windows, right? For Windows, it's the usual stuff. Works like you can create your own installers. You can use whatever
Hmm.
installer it is. Setup. I think the MS or the different all those things will work the same way. Nowadays, everything is deployed to WinGet, so I think you could also best to deploy it to WinGet. And for Linux, so what I've found, the most convenient one is this property self-contained, that you set that to true, so that all the necessary libraries, all the DLLs that your application needs gets also gets created on the build on the output folder of your release folder, so that you
Okay.
can just zip everything and then just give it to your customer. They don't have to install the .NET 8 runtime, for example. The only downside for that is your application is a little bit bigger. Instead of a few MB, maybe 100 MB, or if you zip it, then it'll become 60 or 40 MB or something like that.
Okay.
And also that if you, let's say you're on Windows, you can compile to Linux from Windows, but you need to make it an executable. So you need to take that the output of the compile output, put it in your on a Mac OS machine or on a Linux machine, and then you just run this command chmod plus X to make it an executable.
Okay.
But if you're writing your code in on Mac OS or on Linux itself, then you don't need to do this part. So only if you published it from a Windows machine, then you have to
Okay.
do this. And what I've do for FintX is that after I published with self-contained true, I just zip the whole folder and then just make it available for download, so that whoever is on a Linux machine will just download the zip file, extract it anywhere, and then just run it.
Okay.
And the other option is, okay, deploy it to a store like an app store. In Ubuntu, there's a Snap store
Snap
where you
Store
can.
of Ubuntu. Yes.
Yeah, I haven't tried that, but I'll be trying it out soon.
Okay.
Okay. Now for the interesting bit for Mac OS,
Oh.
like we were discussing earlier, I've been a Windows
Yes.
developer for a really long time. So when I did the Mac OS, like this is tough. It took a while for me to get things get things working. So for Mac OS, you need an app developer account, and you have to pay, of course, yearly. and you will need a Mac OS, a Mac laptop for this. So because you can only compile on a Mac laptop, and then
No, no,
after you
it's the usual stoned street, right?
it's Apple strategy to sell the
Yes, yes,
to
yes,
get you
yes,
to
yes,
buy their
yes, yes.
laptops there. And okay, so once you have that, you need to create a development certificate. So once you have the Apple developer account, if you log into the website or you via Xcode, you can create your development certificates. You need to create an ID for your app. It's required by Apple. And then again, for me, you need to publish self-contained true, and then create what they call a plist file. So this is a file where it just lists some properties about your app. It has a specific format, and then once you have all that, you have to create it into an app folder structure.
Mm.
So this is there's a specific folder structure that Mac OS expects you to follow, and then after the folder structure, then you have to rename the folder, and it should end with a .app. And then after you've done all that, you need to take your app and submit the .app to Apple server to get it notarized. So there's a command that you need to run. Then it will send everything to Apple, and then you wait for a while, wait for a few minutes, maybe up to an hour, and then you can check if everything is okay. Then you can run another command to stay what you call. So the output of the notarization is stapled to your app. It's kind of it gets attached to your app. So after that, then you can now distribute your app to other Mac OS
Yes.
installations. Takes a while to get everything done, but what for me what I've actually ended up is ended up creating a script to automate this, like from here, from publishing to creating the folder structure to submitting it to the Apple server to stapling it. I just created a script for that so that I know I
Okay.
just run the script whenever I need to. And yeah, just a tip. What I found is that it's, even though I don't use Xcode, it's much easier to just install Xcode. So it's kind of like when you're developing on Windows, you just install Visual Studio because Visual Studio will install
Yes,
everything for
yes,
you that
yes,
you
yes,
need.
yes, yes. It's real.
Same thing, yeah. Same thing here. You install Xcode, and then you will need other dev tools to run, say, for example, the notarization, the signing, and everything that you can install via Xcode, and then the development certificates. Your certificate plus the certificates from Apple itself, you can get those via. You can get those manually, but you can get those easily via Xcode too. So a lot of certificates that needs to get installed to your keychain before you can actually
Of
start
course.
distributing your application. Okay, yeah. So that's macOS is a little bit more involved, but once you have the script, it's fine. Okay, so other stuff that I ran into, and as I play around with Avalonia, the big one would be that there's no global exception handler. It's not like in WPF where you can have a global exception handler which will just catch everything and your app will not crash, right? So you can just resume from there. In Avalonia, they don't have that. So you need to handle the exceptions. If it's not handled, it will crash your app.
Okay.
Like in my case in Fin, for example, I have tabs, right? So if there's an exception in the tab, if this were WPF, I can catch the exception and then just close the tab, but the app still remains because in theory each tab is independent from each other.
Yes.
But so in this case, I can't create a global exception handler. So I have to in the code you just have to make sure that you're handling every single exception. And then for data grid, okay, data grid and in WPF you can just create a data grid. It will run and you will see it. In in Avalonia, it's a separate NuGet package, which means you have to create you have to
Okay.
reference the NuGet package, and then you have to add the style into the app.xaml. Otherwise, your data grid will not render. I keep forgetting this, but I think a lot of people also keep forgetting this, especially the ones that are coming from the WPF background.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And this attribute, the X shared, right? So if you have like many icons, you just say X shared equals false in WPF, so that you can use those each time you request for that resource in your code, you get a new instance. So the icon is not
Okay.
shared. So you just say it shared equals false, but that is not there in in Avalonia. But it's easy enough to create a control that can that can behave like X shared equals false. And for performance, compiled bindings is of course recommended. You just it's on by default, and do your best not to turn it off. And this will reduce your runtime binding errors. And a lot of performance issues with WPF apps has to do with the runtime bindings, because those are exceptions that gets thrown, and exceptions are not that fast. And when you want to display a tabular, a tree, of course, you can do a tree view, but for performance, it's best to use tree data grid because it uses virtualization. So a tree data grid would be much faster than your tree view or your data grid. And for displaying text, like large amount of text, use Avalonia Edit. And this one, of course, the last one is it's not something specific to Avalonia, but if you're writing a UI like in Avalonia, you don't block the UI and try to do your work async.
Okay.
All right, and this is finally my last one. Okay, writing cross-platform desktop app is so easy with Avalonia, because you just you write the code once, and then you publish it to Windows, you publish to Linux, and you publish to Mac. That's it. And the of course you can have a single code base. You can have one team that's maintaining it, and it's easy. But when it comes to the deployment part, that is still platform specific. The way you deploy to Windows, to Linux, and to Mac, you will still need work there. And like as I've shown on the earlier slides, right, for Windows and Linux and Mac, those are different ways of deploying, and you have to
Of
follow
course.
whatever those platforms require.
Yes.
And any XAML developer, WPF, Xamarin, when you are UWP, all your skill sets are going to transfer over nicely to.
Of course. Yes.
As you guys saw, I think it's mostly very, very close to WPF. I think the styling is the only one that's it's a bit different.
Oh. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, and one last thing here that it also falls into styling is the in WPF we have those. It's common to use data triggers. And here in Avalonia, they don't have data triggers. But you can achieve the same functionality using a style as well.
Okay. But also we can say that the product is growing faster and having a big community. If the same thing is asked by several people, maybe it will be released in the next step, in next release, right?
Yeah, I hope so. Well, like they said, they have this commercial product called Avalonia.xpf, which can understand this data triggers and event triggers.
Okay.
So it's actually up to the Avalonia, the company, to decide whether do they want to make this functionality available in the open source version, the Avalonia.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's it. That's the last slide for me.
Okay.
Thanks so much, guys. I hope I didn't bore you with the presentation.
No, not boring at all. But we have to say thank you to you, because it's 3:21 IC on your PC, right? In AM. So
yeah.
it's not yet February at your latitude, but it's 3:21 of the 30 of January, and here is 2021. So I want to say thank you, Erik, for your
You're welcome.
availability, okay, your kindness. And of course, your sources can be found at your GitHub section, right? And your
Right.
GitHub repository is public.
Oh yes, yes. So let me
Oh,
just
okay,
paste this on the chat.
perfect, perfect.
And what I
I
will
have
do.
I've seen that you have shared also the links, and I will attach the links to as comment of this talk.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you very much. Have a good night, Erik, because I
Thank you.
think that your night is starting. I hope for you that you are going to sleep now and on to work. But in our case, we have to go to dinner. So everybody, I want to thank you. I want to thank all the people that have following your fantastic teach. Okay. And thanks a lot, and keep in
Welcome.
touch, Erik.
Yes,
Okay.
we'll do. We'll do. You're welcome. Thanks. Thanks so much, guys. Thanks so much
Bye.
for listening to me.
Bye, you
Hey,
all.
yeah, yeah. Bye.